Welcome to Grow Fast, Grow Smart, the PI Playbook by Accelerator, the podcast exclusively designed to help personal injury law firms reach their full potential and serve their clients better. Today's episode is hosted by Chad Dudley, partner at Dudley DeBosier Injury Lawyers and co-founder of Accelerator Law Firm Consultants.
All right, welcome to the Grow Fast, Grow Smart PI Playbook podcast with your host here, Chad Dudley. Today, I have a great guest, Gabriel Stiritz with Lexamica, good friend, and doing some really cool stuff in our space, helping law firms maximize their dollars on referred out cases. Gabriel, good to have you here, and tell us a little bit about how you got started and how you got into this line of work.
Yeah, Chad, thanks for having me on. Real excited to chat today. How I got started, I started off in wage law. So not probably your typical guest on the show or listener. There's not a lot of us out there, but I was the CEO, non-lawyer CEO of a wage firm here in Arkansas, doing cases all across the country.
And so how did you get from there to developing software that helps law firms manage the cases that they refer out? Like, what problem did you see? What prompted you to go down this path?
Yeah, so we were the recipient of a lot of referrals. So Chad, you run personal injury law firm, brand-based advertising. I go down to Baton Rouge. I see your smiling mug everywhere. And people who see those billboards of law firms that are on TV, radio, billboards, or even digital marketing, they're not sophisticated legal consumers. And so when you're out there advertising for personal injury cases, people are going to call you about everything, right? You get calls for slip and fall, dog bites. You get calls for med mal, work comp, employment. I would be curious to know the craziest call that your intake team's ever gotten. I'm sure you get some really wild stuff. But what happens is there's always either a match or not a match for those cases. And so when you've got big campaigns running, you get all kinds of calls. You only want certain calls coming in, and then the rest of them, ideally, you're going to find another lawyer who's going to take that, partly because that's a better customer experience, saying, hey, let me connect you with this other attorney directly rather than sending them to the bar, or worst case scenario, saying, hey, we just can't help and there's nothing else here. So the way I came into this, though, was that as an employment law firm, we were getting referrals from motor vehicle firms, all kind of other law firms all over, because not that many lawyers handle employment cases. So we would take their overflow employment claims and we would vet them and retain them and pay referral fees on that.
And so you see this need, you see this, gap in the marketplace, and you make the decision, look, I'm going to start a software company that helps law firms be better at this. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, what I saw, so I started in the legal space in 2019, and then almost immediately we were hit with COVID. And what that did is took all of these lawyers who had been slowly, but over time, moving into the cloud. So moving on to Litify, Filevine, Clio, Smart Advocate. There's a lot of platforms moving slowly. COVID accelerated that growth. I don't know how much, I don't have statistics, but it seemed like overnight, everyone was on Zoom, everyone was in the cloud, crazy fast digital transformation for law firms. And that was really one of the big barriers to a lot of add-on legal technology services that have a lot of value, like your client portal or outsourcing your medical record retrieval, start to finish, demand letter generation. There's all the add-on services, and referrals was one that no one had successfully turned into a plug-in for law firms, and taken that and gone from the old way of doing it, which is administrative staff and emailing for reports, and turning that into something that just seamlessly works. And so it wasn't that referrals was honestly like the only thing that I've ever cared about, but it seemed like this thing where there was a lot of friction around it and just a lot of bad business practices. Only a few law firms were really doing this well. And so there's an opportunity to, once as everyone got into the cloud during COVID, to start to clean this up in a really big way.
Yeah. And, I've always looked at it and gone, whether it's hiring people or making referrals, good people know good people, right? So if we're trying to hire for a spot and we got some really good employees, we're like, hey, look, who do you know that would be a good fit for this firm? In a very similar vein, I think if a client calls you and says, look, can you handle this type of case and it's not in your wheelhouse, I think we are doing a great service to that client by recommending an attorney that you trust, is going to take care of them and get a good result or do the best they can. And I think it's a tremendous value add that you can do for the cases that you don't handle. But there's so many law firms that don't do this. I think some of the issues that they run into is just managing this process, right? You have to follow up with these attorneys. You have to, was the client ever happy? How did this case turn out? Or they promised to pay a co-counsel fee, but did they do it? All that stuff can make it sort of a overwhelming nightmare for many firms. But Lex kind of helps with a lot of those issues. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. There's the best thing you could do before Lexamica was to hire a staff person to manage this by hand. Email threads and maybe a spreadsheet, sticky notes, that kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, everyone has these stories of, well, I know that I've sent this case out and I know that Jimmy got paid and he never sent me a check, but there's really kind of water under the bridge, but a real sense of like, did not go well. And maybe you just stop sending Jimmy more referrals because he didn't send you that great referral check that he should have sent you. And then there's law firms that have really invested in it, but it's pretty hard and expensive and time consuming to go to conferences, to meet the right people, to vet, to track the performance of your referral lawyer. So while it's a real opportunity to provide a better client experience and also to generate revenue, it's something that a lot of law firms have either implemented poorly or have just said, it's really not worth it, or said, hey, I'm going to throw this stuff out there and maybe I'll get some mailbox money, but I know that there's going to be a lot of loss along the way, but there's really nothing that I can do about that part of it. So I'm just going to eat it when I really would prefer not to. And one of the things that you said to me near when we started talking about this was super helpful, which is that if you're a brand-based marketing law firm, so your name is on your billboards, your advertisements, when you hit a certain threshold, when you start to get selective enough, you can actually generate some really solid value off of referred cases. Because I'd always kind of looked outside in at larger advertising firms and know the metrics, but you said, and correct me if you think this has changed since we last talked about it, is if your want rate, so if the number for 10 leads, if you want less than 7 of them, 7 or less, if you want rates below 70%, you could expect to get close to 50% of your marketing ROI back as referral fees from cases. So I really wanted to hear your thought on that. Has that changed since we last talked?
Well,
Do you still
yeah,
see that
I mean,
true?
and the idea is, okay, well, if a firm, for each case type, like if you get 100 auto leads, what percentage of those meet your criteria and becomes a qualified lead, or more simply a want, right? You want to represent that client. And as firms get more selective, meaning their want ratio goes down, and most firms live for auto somewhere between 40 to 55% of their leads turn into wants. For premise liability, it's usually between 5 and 10%. Then you get to the offshoots like med mal and nursing home, which can be sometimes sub 5%. But if you look at those, the concept is as you get more selective, you probably have more cases that you're turning down more cases that referral attorneys would be happy to take. So as that number comes down, you should see increased revenue from co-counsel or referred out cases. And yeah, firms that do this well, they can recover 25% to 50% of their advertising budget through some of these mechanisms. And the client gets representation. This is something that you wouldn't handle. You're not sending them back out into the void to go, find some other attorney. You're matching them up with someone that you check on regularly, that you follow up on to make sure the clients are happy, that you have a relationship with and trust, so that they get good representation. It just doesn't meet your criteria to handle in-house.
Right. And I would imagine that for a lot of law firms, you're talking about ancillary personal injury categories, so medical malpractice, Social Security, premise liability. Some law firms have those in-house, some of them aren't doing those in-house. So it really depends on a law firm by law firm basis. And then as your kind of brand reach grows too, a lot of law firms we're seeing they get cases in adjacent states, but every once in a while, multiple times a year, you'll get something from across the country. And so there's really this broad base, I call it long tail of leads that come in that you aren't going to handle yourself. It's easy to capture. We talked about Pareto principle on the last recording session we just did. There's a Pareto principle on your referrals too, and your cases, which is there's going to be a bulk of kind of local referrals, local unwanted leads that you need to handle. And then there's this long tail of other things that come in because some person moves across the country and they still know Dudley DeBosier. And so they're calling you from Nebraska or from California, wherever they moved to, but they grew up seeing your commercials. And so they're still going to call you, even though they don't know that you don't practice across the country necessarily. So yeah, there's this like other bucket, and it just gets so thinly spread out that it's hard to build that without having some kind of national network or very, very wide personal network.
Yeah, and look, our goal is, every client that reaches out to us, or potential client that reaches out to us, ideally the best result would be, okay, this is something that we want to handle in-house and represent them. The second best outcome is, okay, if it's not something that we handle, can we at least match them up with a very trustworthy law firm that's going to help them out in some form or fashion? If neither of those two apply, can we at least maybe point them in the right direction, right? And so for the second part of that, it helps tremendously to connect you and stay in touch with the firms you use a lot. But then also, if you get a referral from an area you're not familiar with, you can find somebody, right, and match them up. And so that is attractive. And I am a lot of the firms I've worked with are so intimidated by this process, and this just makes it so easy.
Yeah. I think that there can be a very high perceived barrier to entry around what are the ethics of doing co-counsel referrals. How do I know who to trust? How do I know how to follow up? How do I know what's a good case to send out to someone? I don't want to bother someone with a bad case. I'm not an attorney that practices this. Is this going to be bothersome to them? And there's a lot of mental barriers to walk through. And what I've also seen too is, while it's a real great source of revenue, like you said, very high potential ROI, people have very large burning issues that they have to solve day in and day out. They have to manage their marketing budget. They have to manage their intake call center. They have to do their litigation, their pre-litigation. So there's several very large things that are just constant time and attention sucks that are always knocking down the door, where referrals are more of a proactive revenue opportunity. And so it can be hard to carve the time out. It's one of those it's important but not urgent. And there's a lot of important and urgent things when you're running a law firm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, to the listeners out there, we're going, well, what do we do with this information? And I would say, first and foremost, look at, for your core case types, because it's going to be a little bit different for each case type. But on average, for each 100 calls you get, how many are qualified leads? If for your auto cases, if it's below 50%, it's below 40%, the lower it goes, you should be asking yourselves, do I have a vibrant referral practice? And if the answer is no, you should give some careful consideration to how you're going to go about doing that. Lexamica, obviously, one option. You can try to do it in-house. Sometimes it can get up a little bit unwieldy to manage in-house, but you should be asking those types of questions, right? And if you're not generating any revenue from the cases you turn down, when I say turn down to handle in-house, this could be some found revenue. And who doesn't like
absolutely. That? Look, I would say that the second best thing to going all in on this is to start, right? Like I'm a huge believer in iterating toward where you're trying to go. You don't have to boil the ocean. Just take one step in the right direction. Get another referral partner in place. And like Chad said, look at your numbers. Like, where are you turning down the most cases? Is it that you have a marketing campaign that's generating a lot of traffic in a certain area, and just by happenstance you happen to be ranking really well in a certain area and you're turning those down, that's a great place to start. It's like once you figure out the buckets of what it is that you are disqualifying, whether it's you're moving your case values up and so there's more smaller MVA cases, whether you're generating a certain type of other personal injury case, or you have that's where I would start. Just look for the most bang for your buck. You don't need to go and try to have everything perfect before you get started. You can find a good partner and start referring out to them. The long tail is great. There's money there. But usually when I meet a law firm, they have between 5 and 10 referral partners that capture most of the referrals that they need to make. And that's the place where I would say to get started if you aren't doing it already.
Right. Just take whatever case. Say you handle auto cases. Find someone that that handles auto cases out there that and tries to go visit with them. Hey, look, we turned down some cases. You want to take a look at the ones we turned down. Walk through your parameters for what that referral relationship looks like, and get going. Right. That simple.
Absolutely. And I would say, one of the best pairings that I've seen is you've got top market law firms that are spending a lot in a DMA on their advertising. Those law firms always have cases that they don't want to handle, that don't fit their criteria. If you're a smaller shop or you're just getting started, reach out to one of those firms and say, hey, listen, if you turn it down, I'm here. I'd love to talk to that client. That's a great ask to make. And conversely, if you're a larger top market firm, there's going to be smaller shops that are really interested in the cases that don't meet your criteria anymore, because for you, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. But that's a really synergistic business relationship that I've seen all over the country. And you should be seeking to develop that either as the smaller or the larger firm if that matches your profile.
Absolutely right. And look, there's so much opportunity on both sides. If you're a firm that wants to get some more business, go to some of the big brands and see if they'll get on the referral list, right? And there's ways that I've seen firms be very, very successful doing that. And then vice versa. If you're getting a lot of cases that you're turning down, go pair up, just like you said. What are some common mistakes that you see, I guess, with firms when they're trying to go down this path? Is any words of caution that you could give to our listeners that you say, watch out for this?
Yeah, that's a really great question. The thing that makes a good referral partnership, what I found, is to find lawyers who want to do referrals. Don't try to force referrals on someone just because it's your friend. Like Jimmy, who you've known since grade school, he may be a great lawyer, but that doesn't mean he's a good referral partner. Good referral partners want to look at the things that you don't, evaluate those, retain them, and then communicate effectively about them. That's a very specific thing. And so it's real easy to set up a referral relationship just because you really like Jimmy and you guys get drinks every now and then. That does not mean that he's a good referral partner. And that's, I would say, the biggest mistake that I've seen is just not evaluating your referral partners on those terms, but saying, well, I like this guy or girl, and I'm just going to send them some cases. That ends up being the recipe for never getting a referral check. And that's when I talk to people and they're like, yeah, now that you mention it, I haven't gotten a check from so-and-so in 10 years. And I'm like, well, okay, that's not an effective referral relationship. That's you doing your friend a favor. And that's not a good business practice.
Right. You can't it's not a set it and forget it model. You're constantly, you're checking in, hey, what's the status of these cases? Tell me a little more, copy me on demands, or let me know when suit's filed, or when there's things that you can communicate. And also I say communicate with the clients. Just because someone else is taking the lead on the case doesn't mean that you can't or shouldn't communicate with the client in the sense of checking in with them. Hey, how's it going? You can even survey them and making sure that those referral relationships that you're making a recommendation, you want to make sure that's a good recommendation.
Yeah. And if you're going to fee share, in most jurisdictions, you're assuming joint responsibility for the client. So you're ethically as on the hook for that referral as you are for your in-house cases. And so you really have the same obligations to the client, to the state bar. And so I would say that the reframe, the heuristic is you should view this as true co-counsel, even if you're not work sharing. It's a co-counsel relationship, and they're 100%. Still your clients, even if someone else is working the case. And that's another big mistake, is to just assume that because you've sent it out the door, it's not your case anymore. If you're getting a fee share in most states, you're still on the hook. And I haven't seen that come up a whole lot, but it does come up from time to time, and you can be named in the same malpractice suit as the lawyer you refer the case to.
Oh, yeah. Yes. If people want to check out Lexamica, what is the best way that they can do that?
Yeah, so Lexamica.com, plenty of ways to get engaged. We have 2 communities. We have law firms that are sending cases out because they have those leads that they're getting in. They need a home for them. And we also have lawyers that are just taking referrals from other law firms. And so the world runs with both of those. Would love to talk to you if either of those is appealing.
Well, Gabriel, thanks for being on the podcast, and thanks for your insight into this area of our practices that is really so overlooked by so many firms. And look forward to hearing more from you on the next time we get together.
Yeah, and I'll do the shout out in your direction, Chad. You have 2 conferences coming up this fall. I will be at both of them. We're sponsoring. We're excited to be a supporter of what you and Mickey are doing with CG Advertising.
Yeah. That's right. We got the Accelerate Your Average Fee Conference in Nashville on September 26th and 27th. We have some remote options. So if you can't get there, you can attend remotely. It is some really good stuff. We're going to talk about some things that our firm has done in-house and also with other law firms to help them increase their average closed fee, the results that they're getting for their clients. You're going to be hearing from me, my partner, Stephen DeBosier, James Pelche, and many of our lead attorneys on how it works on a day-to-day basis. So invite all of you all to attend either in person or remotely. In person will be much more fun in Nashville. But if you can't make it, you can attend remotely. Thank you, guys.
That's a wrap on another eye-opening look into the personal injury world. Thanks for listening to Grow Fast, Grow Smart, the PI Playbook by Accelerator.